As long as I was going after the crooks that didn't have badges, I was everybody's hero.
Hey guys, we're back after about a 3-month hiatus, and we're talking today with Aubrey Robertson. Aubrey is a lawyer in Waco. We'll let him tell you all about his background. And he's also running for McLennan County District Attorney. Now that's a job I know a little bit about, not much, because when I was DA, that was way last century. And we did everything with a table full of Rolodex files, Rolodex cards. Now it's all modern age, computerized. Instead of 11 lawyers, they have about 30 over there. Well, Robbie has been an assistant DA. He's got a varied background, and I'm going to introduce you to Robbie right now and let Robbie tell you a little bit about his background, why he's running for DA, and then we're going to talk about some legal issues that are relevant to the criminal justice system here in McLennan County. Robbie, tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me here. And I want to say something first, too. You call me Robbie. Everybody else will see the signs and they say, and on the ballot, it'll be Aubrey Robertson.
Right.
And so just so that is the same person. I am Robbie. I am Aubrey. So if somebody hears you calling me Robbie, that's what that's about. No, again, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on this topic and everybody that listens and watches. So I'm originally from Houston. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. Graduated from a place called Humble High School, spelled like humble, but the H is silent. Well, I'll be sure and correct you if you say it wrong. Graduated from Humble High School, and then I went to Baylor as an undergrad. I was in what was known as the Baylor Interdisciplinary Corps. It was a new thing at Baylor, or relatively new, where they weren't, you didn't take like regular English and math classes. It was a program focused on cultures and religions and learning about other people's cultures and religions. And it was a great experience because, you think about someone who's 18 or 19 years old, going away to college for the first time, getting all these new experiences. And so then to be exposed to these cultures, these other cultures. And when I say that, I mean, like we would study, Hindu culture, and then we would go to a Hindu religious service, and then have Indian food, and you would immerse yourself in the texts and the art of a particular culture. And so it was a great experience. It's a great way to, I think, teach people as opposed to the old.
And you did this through Baylor when you were a student at Baylor.
Right. As an undergraduate, it's in the Honors College. So it's part of the Honors College program. And then outside of that, my majors were political science and Slavic and Eastern European studies. And I had a minor in history. I thought after college, I would want to go to law school and then go write constitutions for former Soviet bloc countries.
Yeah, put it in their constitution that they're going to get into NATO so we can start a war with Russia.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, let's poke the bear.
Poke the bear.
Right. So that was my dream, was to go and be, not a founding father, but to help influence people in forming representative government. And so that's what I wanted to do with those majors.
That's what Thomas Jefferson did with France.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And not only here in his own country, but then he helped export the revolution to France.
Correct. I don't want to compare myself to Thomas Jefferson, but I mean, if somebody else,
well, not yet.
Right. If somebody else does, they can. So I ended up going to law school on the East Coast because I thought, well, if that's what I want to do as a career, I need to go to some East Coast law school and learn those ways. And so I ended up at New York Law School. And while there, I got enrolled in what they called the criminal law clinic. I didn't want to do moot court. That was not really I didn't have any interest in that kind of back and forth in moot court. But I loved what the people at Baylor call practice court. That kind of being in a courtroom, learning what you do in those situations. And so my law school didn't have a practice court, but we had a clinic, a criminal law clinic, and it was very similar. But also through that clinic, I got licensed as a lawyer in New York, as a third-year law student.
Licensed early.
Correct. Yeah. Right. You have the opportunity to get licensed and then practice with a supervising lawyer. And so they hooked us up with a bunch of lawyers from the Legal Aid Society. And through this clinic, we got to go and represent people charged with crimes in New York City and state courts. And so as a third-year law school student, getting to actually go into court was a phenomenal experience.
So were you assigned to like the public defender's office or to a criminal defense attorney or to the DA's office?
So it was through the Legal Aid Society is like a public defender's office. It is a service for people who cannot afford attorneys. So it's an indigent defense service. And so we would get partnered with one of the lawyers at the Legal Aid Society, and we would they were our supervising attorney, and we would shadow them in court, but we would also have our own cases, and I would go make appearances in court at arraignment dockets and things like that for our clients.
And actually get to speak.
Right, be on the record.
Even though you're still in law school, you've got that provisional license.
Right.
Yeah, I always had one or two Baylor students at my office when I was DA.
Right.
That we had under that provisional license, and they would get to go in and, do minor hearings and make little arguments and things like that. And a couple of them I hired to stay with me afterwards.
Well, and I mean, that's a great segue, because that's actually how I got my first job after law school. Was I had interned with the Harris County District Attorney's Office in Houston, and I had my my third-year barred card. And so even in Houston during my internship, I got to do exactly what you're describing. I would handle motions to suppress or motions to revoke probation as a prosecutor in Harris County while still in law school.
Wow, a motion to suppress argument, that's kind of involved for a intern, somebody like that. So they must have thought pretty highly of you.
Well, maybe they did, but I think you and I both know that the motion to suppress is really about a lot of legal research. And so this was some trial lawyer pawning all their legal research off on some poor intern.
Okay.
And then I just got the opportunity to argue it in front of the judge. But I have no misconceptions about, I was just a workhorse there. So I was just there to do the research.
And frankly, a motion to suppress is a lot more onerous on the defense lawyer than it is on the prosecutor. Usually. Right. Usually. Sometimes not.
Correct.
Yeah. What is a motion to suppress? Tell our audience in case they don't know.
Right. So you see motions to suppress if a criminal defense attorney like us sees maybe a violation of someone's Fourth Amendment rights, if there's an illegal search or seizure, we will come in as defense attorneys and file what's called a motion to suppress. And what that says is the items that were seized or the statements that were taken in opposition to the law. So it was an illegal search or seizure. So when you hear about Fourth Amendment violations, that's what we're talking about: illegal search and seizure. And so we come in as defense attorneys and we file a motion to suppress, and it says these items were seized illegally, were taken illegally, and they should be not allowed, excluded from the trial. From the jury seeing them or from a judge considering them. And so we file that motion, and then the burden shifts to the state to prove that, no, in fact, there was no Fourth Amendment violation here.
Yeah, and if the motion to suppress goes to the actual drugs, say it was a bad stop, and you win that, you've won the case, right?
Right, exactly. And so that's a perfect example. If it's a baggie of cocaine and that is illegally seized, illegally taken, and the judge agrees that the motion to suppress should be granted, those drugs are thrown out. So now the state has no evidence, literally no evidence that you committed a violation, that you were in possession of any drugs, because the drugs have been excluded.
And then they had to dismiss the case or find some squirrely way to hotwire some kind of lesser offense if
Right.
they can. you know.
Right. I mean, sometimes there's the occasional twisting of the arm of, hey, we know we can't prove it, but come on, your guy should plead to something anyway. I mean, I think anybody who's dealt with prosecutors has had that experience. And I mean, as a former prosecutor, I mean, sometimes when you know someone's guilty, it's hard to let go and dismiss that case. But that's what you're charged to do.
And sometimes there is a little room for some arm twisting because along with that stop might have been maybe an altercation with a cop or something like
Sure.
that you can get them for those underlying offenses. Robbie, you said you grew up in Houston.
Right.
Tell us about that.
So I grew up in Houston. My parents, my dad was a machinist. He worked nights. My mom, she worked for an insurance company, AIG. And so we grew up, I grew up in that environment. My parents also did real estate on the side. And so now we see all these house flipping shows. My parents were doing that back in the 80s. So I can remember, spending weekends at these rundown houses, tearing out sheetrock or whatever that. And so my parents have always had this drive to be in business for themselves. So they quit their jobs and opened several businesses. They ran a car lot at one point. They ran an antique store at one point. Now my dad sells portable buildings in the state of Texas. He's one of their best sellers, usually top 2 or 3 sellers in the state. And so they have this drive and passion to always be, I guess, in charge of their own destiny. And so I definitely think some of that bled over into me. I think,
Rubbed off on you, huh?
yeah. I think there's some of that. And I think if that weren't true, I wouldn't be able to run for an office like this. I mean, putting yourself out there and saying that, trust me to do a better job than the other guy. And so I credit my parents a lot with that momentum and that drive.
Now, Aubrey, I know that you grew up and went to college, went to law school as a Republican.
Right.
And now you're running in Waco, McLennan County, a stronghold of Republicanism, and you're running as a Democrat. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, much to the chagrin of my Trump-supporting father, I am running as a Democrat in McLennan County. And
So what's the deal with that?
yeah, I think it is because the Democratic Party aligns more with my values, and it's. I believe in fairness and justice and treating people equally. And these are some things that I see lacking in some of our modern Republicans. And so I didn't really want to align myself with exclusion. I wanted to work to be more inclusive because I think, especially in an area like criminal justice, the more voices and ideas you get, the better. I mean, it's an all hands on deck type problem. And so, I think you should be willing and able to listen to voices from across the spectrum. And like I said, it appears to me that some of the more modern Republican movement is not as inclusive.
There's also a big middle of the road group of people who sometimes identify as Democrat, sometimes as a Republican. I've kind of done that throughout my life, depending on what was going on. I haven't voted Republican much, but I've oftentimes really identified very conservatively. Now, when I was DA, if this had been a 2-party state, I may have been a Republican, but it was a 1-party state back then. You had your conservative Democrats and you had your liberal Democrats. And I was a conservative, law enforcement-oriented Democrat back then. But as the Republicans started taking over the state with the help of Karl Rove, I started seeing this mean-spirited kind of attitude come out. Narrow-minded, mean-spirited, and no compassion.
Right.
So it pushed me more toward being identified as a Democrat more, although most of my friends are Republicans. And sometimes they'll vote for a Democratic candidate just because of the issues. And that's what I'm hoping they'll do with you.
Right. Absolutely. I'm hoping they'll do that too. And that's, I remind people all the time, nobody knows who you voted for. When you go in that booth and you select your candidate that you want to win that race, nobody knows who you voted for. And so you can come out of that booth and tell everybody that you voted for someone, whether you did or not. And so I'm like you, I'm hoping there's a lot of those Republicans that will cross over and feel that, especially this office, the district attorney's office is not a political office. It's not, it's an office that's based on facts and evaluating facts and applying those facts to the law.
And seeing justice done. Isn't that the first rule in the rule book?
Right. Absolutely. That's the oath that the prosecutor takes, is to see that justice is done.
Yeah, not to convict,
Right.
but to see justice done.
Which is what's so important about what you said about compassion and being willing to extend that compassion to people who aren't like you or people who may be in a different situation than you are. And there's a huge component of compassion in justice. Because justice isn't just about the person that's charged with the crime, right? It's not just about giving that person justice. It's about getting justice for the victims of a crime. You know, it's about making sure that the family of someone who has been murdered gets some form of closure in those cases. And so justice works both ways, but, you know, compassion's a huge part of that. And so I think that's, like you said, I think that's why I guess veered away or steered away from Republican politics.
Now, one thing I learned being DA is that there's no way to make everybody happy.
Right.
You just can't. You're going to tick off half the people, just about every decision you make.
Right.
I have spent many, many hours in my office when I was DA, meeting with family members of victims,
Right.
meeting with parents of murdered children, and listening to their concerns. And one thing I did find out along the way is that no matter what the punishment was that was meted out, even in a few cases, the death penalty, the victims and their families were not made whole.
Right.
There's still this emptiness that can only be filled by personal growth, by acceptance, by spirituality,
Right.
by faith in God, things like that. You're never going to get even. You're not. No sentence is ever long enough, and death is not even permanent enough for most victims. So it really takes a balancing. You got to care about people's feelings, but at the same time, you don't want to lock somebody up forever for something they shouldn't be locked up forever for.
Correct.
Which brings me to another concern that I have, and that's these damn private prisons for profit.
Right.
And since the private prisons for profit have come to the forefront, we're seeing our legislature, and I really think if you follow the money, you'll figure out why.
Yeah.
But we've seen our legislature increasing sentences, getting more and more zero tolerance for this case, that case, the other case, and pretty soon there are so many special exceptions about this is zero tolerance that nothing is being handled the normal way anymore.
Right.
What do you think about these private prisons, Aubrey?
Yeah. So let me jump back real quick and address something you said, because it's a topic I know you and I don't agree about. That's the death penalty. And I do believe that there are cases that are worthy of the death penalty. I think there's capital murders pending in this county right now where the death penalty should be sought. I'll tell you and any voter that asks that my office in the appropriate case will absolutely seek the death penalty.
I did too.
Right.
I was morally opposed to the death penalty, but legally I had no choice because in Texas, there's still not life without parole.
No, there is life without parole.
Oh, there is now? I didn't think that ever passed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now and in fact, you'll often see plea bargains where a defendant might plead to life without the possibility of parole.
Well, see, if they'd have had that when I was DA, I doubt I would have prosecuted a death case Number one, because they follow you forever. The
Right.
appeals are almost never over. And then on the slight chance that maybe you are executing somebody that didn't do it, I wouldn't want that. But when you're looking at someone like, say, the people that committed the Lake Waco murder,
Right.
or Kenneth McDuff, and you're thinking the max they're going to spend is maybe 20 years, then that puts the death penalty back on the table, even for people who, like me, who are morally opposed to it.
Right.
But I still prosecuted 6 death penalty cases.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just think it's one of the tools that a prosecutor has in their bag, and they have to be willing to use every tool at their disposal. I'm not going to, tie my hand behind my back and not use something at my disposal if I think it will address, crime rates. If I think I can solve part of the crime issue, then I want to use everything I can. And so I think there are particularly heinous crimes where the death penalty is absolutely warranted, absolutely the right thing that should happen, not only for the specific deterrence of that defendant, the punishment for that defendant, but I think the death penalty has a general deterrent effect. I think that people think about those things. They know if the McLennan County DA's office is going to seek the death penalty, if I go out there and murder someone or, shoot someone in the appropriate capital context, then maybe they rethink that, So I just want to say that I think the death penalty is the right way to go in a number of cases.
I agree with you on that. I do. I can't disagree with that, even though I don't like it.
Right.
I can't disagree with it. Folks,
go ahead.
This is the Vic Feazell Show. We're talking with Aubrey Robertson. He's running for McLennan County DA. We're going to have another episode with Aubrey Robertson. And when we come back with our next episode, we're going to be talking about marijuana. And we might even talk about your guns. So stay tuned and let's see what we say about guns and your marijuana.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Vic Feazell. During these trying times, you might want to just stay home. And at the law offices of Vic Feazell, we understand. That's why we're set up to handle your personal injury claim without you even having to come in. Just give us a call and we'll take it from there. We can send any paperwork straight to your smartphone or computer. Don't delay, because if we don't put money in your pocket, you don't owe us anything. I'm Vic Feazell.